Hi, it's Dougie here at Valto, and in today's session we're going to be talking about model-driven apps for beginners. So this is going to be a quick tutorial about how to get started with a really basic model-driven app. It's for people really that have never seen model-driven apps before and just want to kind of get a bit of a feel for what it is before jumping into it. So let's take a look. So the very first thing that you're going to want to do is navigate to basically the make.powerapps.com website. Now you can get to this Power Apps area by going to Office 365, which is office.com, and then in the top bar just searching for Power Apps and it'll bring you to this page. The next thing that we're going to do is actually create a solution file. So a solution is essentially all of the things that we're going to be running inside of our model-driven app. And by creating as a solution file, it makes it nice and easy for us to move it between different environments within inside of the Power Platform. So by clicking on the solutions, this is going to take me to my solutions area so I can see all the previous solutions that we've created. Now I would recommend that it's a good idea to maybe think about a kind of naming convention if it's not only going to be yourself as an app maker that's going to be making these kind of model-driven apps, and agree that with your team before you get started building your model-driven apps. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to click on this new solution. So I'm only going to be covering really the very basic kind of things that we need to cover off in today's video. But really, all this kind of boils down to is we need to give it a name of what we're going to be calling it in this particular form. I'm just going to be creating a basic kind of incident report kind of app. So people submitting things which maybe there's been some kind of incident in the workplace. But you could create this as any type of app. A lot of them are around sort of case management or having particular kind of records around kind of employees or companies or clients. It's up to you what you're building here, but I'm going to create a little incident report. So this is going to be my incident. My incident report app. Now, in terms of publishers, I would just suggest for starting off, just go with default publishing options in here, and there's no other real kind of anything else that you need to populate when you're first getting started with this. So let's just click on the create button and jump straight into this. That might just take a minute, but after that it'll then pop up and we can see we've got our incident report app solution. So we'll just click on that and that'll open up our solution file. Now, as I said before, the solution file is not just kind of one particular thing. It's made up of multiple different areas. So we've actually got all the apps which are contained within inside of this solution. So typically for like a model-driven app, it would just be the one model-driven app, but it could be multiple if the solution was much larger. Any kind of chatbots or cloud flows, which is the same as Power Automate workflows that we're going to be using inside of here, and any tables. So this is the next thing we're going to be looking at is you actually want to build out your tables for your model-driven app before you even build the model-driven app. This is something which is completely different to what a lot of people used to if you're coming from Canvas Power Apps, where with a Canvas Power App, you're pretty much focusing on the front end first. I mean, it's kind of in the name, Canvas in being that sort of blank canvas that you're starting with. You're thinking about the front end, right? So you're thinking about the usability, what fields, drop downs, and almost where the data goes and where that sits is almost a bit of a secondary thought afterwards. With model-driven apps, it's completely flipping it on its head, where you're completely thinking about the way the data is structured, the relationships between the tables, and how all of that is built together. And you spend 90% of your time building that out first. And then at the end piece, the actual model-driven app itself comes together very quickly after that. So the next thing we're going to do is then build out our table. So using this new button across the top, this is where you can create all the different types of assets for your solution. So I'm going to click on the table here and then I'm going to call this my incidents. So this is actually the table that I'm going to be using where all of my kind of incidents are going to be submitted into. Now, to get started with, this is all we need to do, and then click on save, and this is going to create our table. Again, this might just take a quick minute just to actually create the table. Whilst that's just creating, I'll just talk a little bit about the difference between Canvas apps and sort of model-driven apps. In terms of model-driven apps, the user interface is pretty sort of locked down. It is what it is. There's not a huge amount of configuration and change. So if you've got and you're looking to build an app which has got a lot of configurations in terms of the way you want it to look and feel for users and the overall user journey, and that's very specific to your kind of brand or what you're trying to build, then a Canvas app is more what you're looking to build. Model-driven apps, the benefits are they're much quicker to put together, as we're going to see in this video, than a Canvas app is. They're a lot more reliable in terms of quite often Canvas apps, because they're completely bespoke, they're a lot buggier as well. So anyway, so we've now created our incidents table, and we now need to start thinking about creating the columns within inside of our table. So this is actually what are the kind of fields eventually that users are going to be submitting into our overall table. So we can get to that by clicking on the columns here. Once we're inside the columns area, you'll see that there's actually a whole bunch of pre-built columns for you. So by default, you'll have things like created by, created on as a date, modified by, modified on as the date. And those are very standard fields you expect to see in kind of these databases. And in fact, although it's not a database, if you're familiar with SharePoint and SharePoint lists, you'll know that when you create a SharePoint list, it will automatically create fields such as created by, created as in the date, modified and modified by, and that sort of thing. And it's the same inside of Dataverse, inside of these tables as well. We also have some other default fields as well, which is created. So things like owner, owning business unit, and owning team. These are all security related fields. Now this is different. So if you're coming from a SharePointy kind of background, because actually these allow you to have row level security very easily. So you can, as an owner, as a one person, so saying Joe Blogs has access. Owning team might be, let's say, for example, the development team is the kind of the sort of the team level, and the owning business unit might be a high level like finance or ITS or IT kind of department is the business unit, which then sits underneath it. So you've got this nested kind of layers to security within here as well. So now we're just going to create some columns. So first thing I'm going to do is click on this new column across the top, and then I've got the options of creating a display name, a description for my column, as well as the data type. So there's quite a few different types in here. So we've got things like text, where we can kind of input obviously sort of plain text or larger volumes of text, rich text, sort of HTML, kind of colors, that sort of stuff. Email, so this is going to expect that although it's being typed in as text, it's going to be formatted to meet sort of standards of an email or even a phone number, as an example. We've got number fields, so whole numbers, decimals, floats, including durations and times and all that good stuff, as well as date and time. So you could say it's a date or it's date and time. We can look up, so we can look up to other tables within inside of Dataverse. And choices as well. So it could be a yes, no, or it could be an option sort of set and drop down. We've got currencies and we've got files as well, so we can attach files and images to this as well. So let's just say, first off, we're just going to have the full name of the person who's reporting maybe this incident, and we're just going to leave as a single line of text. There is down here a required field, so you can either say it's optional, meaning that it's completely optional if you put this field in or not. It's business recommended, which means that it will give you a little prompt say, we do recommend you provide this information, however, it will allow you to submit it without it. Or you can say business required, which means you must populate this before the form will actually save. So in this case, we can say business required. Click on save. So now we've got our full name. Maybe we want to then create a couple of extra fields. Let's click on new column. And maybe we're going to now say body part injured or something like that. So what body part? So this would be better actually then as a choice. So we'll come down here and select a choice, and then what we'll do is we're going to say we're going to allow for selecting multiple choices. So it might be that you've injured your sort of head and your kind of foot. Now this is an interesting one, sync with global choice. Now what this means is if you say yes, which is recommended, the choice set can be used in multiple tables and will stay updated everywhere. So it means you have one choice set. So I'm going to create a choice set at the moment called body parts. And if I make it so that it's synced globally, it means that other tables can use that exact same set of choices. So I only have to update the choices in one particular area, and I don't have to keep multiple sets of kind of body parts as a choice list updated. I can either sync this with an existing set of choices. So in Dataverse, there's a whole host of different choices which are already set up for me, or I can actually create my own. So I'm actually just going to click on this option here of a new choice, and then a display name. So this will be body parts, and the label will just be, say, for example, head, shoulders, knees, you guessed it, toes. So you'll also see there's a value. Now this would just give a default value that comes with it, but you can choose to actually change those as well if you wanted to. So we click on save, and then this is now created our column for body parts. We just need to make sure then we select from this drop down our body parts choice options. Oops, just clicked off the wrong thing there. Easily done. So select body parts, and then once we've got that, we just click on save, and then that's then created us this column. There might be one final column that we might want, which might be, say, the date of incident. As a really basic form. Obviously, in real life, there'll probably be loads of other kind of fields that you'd want in there as well. So I'm going to say date and time, and then I'm going to say that this is going to be business recommended. All I then need to do is click on the save button, and again, that's just going to create my column. So now we've created ourselves a table. We've then created our fields or our columns, as they're known inside of our Dataverse table. And one of those included some choices. And actually those choices can now easily be accessed by this choice set over here, so body parts. If I was ever wanting to add more body parts to this, I don't need to go digging through all of this table information. I can go straight into choices and update my choices directly in here. So now we've created our table, we've created our columns. The other thing that we should be thinking about now is creating views within inside of our sort of table. So if I go into my table in here, you'll see actually there's multiple different options I have within here, which is essentially columns, relationship keys, forms, views, charts, dashboards, business rules, and commands. And to give a quick explanation, columns is the columns we were adding before. Relationships are the relationships between other tables, so one to many or many to one, for example. Other key things that you should know about is forms. So actually, we're going to come on to talking about that in a moment, and views. We'll come on to talking about in a moment as well. But also charts and dashboards are really useful to know about. So charts are essentially like quick graphs and things like that, and dashboards put most of those things together, as well as business rules as well. And we might create a follow-up video that explains this a bit more detail, but business rules are essentially like where you can put logic in place to say that this certain field maybe should show or hide or become required under a certain set of logic. So the next thing I want to actually jump into is the views of our table. So views, and there's loads of different types of views as well that you can have, but let's just focus on what we really need, which is the main sort of form, and that will be our default form for our table. So the default up here for our main form is actually the active incidents. So if I click on that, that's then going to show me what this view is going to look like, and by default we only have name and created on as our two columns. But we want to obviously have more sort of columns than that in here. So it might be actually the name is something that we don't actually really want, so we're going to remove that. Created on is probably a good idea to know when it was created on. But we might also want to know the date instance, so the instance of the date. So by clicking on that, they'll add it to our view. It might also be that we want to have some of the other things as well, like full name, as well as the body part that was actually injured. We can move this around as well. So if I click on here, we can choose to move this left and right so we can get them into the order that we actually want it to be. There we go. And actually we can expand these out a little bit. So if we think these are going to be need a little bit more space, we can just move them out a little bit to give them that bit more sort of room within the view as well. There we go. You can also choose to apply filters. So by default, this is just going to show anything which has got the status of active. Now, the rows of data within inside of our tables inside of Dataverse have this kind of concept of active or sort of basically not active, and we can turn that on and off. We can also have other filters as well. So maybe it might be that we want to filter by sort of a certain date range or who created it, or filter by a certain body part. So we might want to just have a view which contains everything which is, say for example, created this week, or maybe we want to create a view which has got everything which has got head injuries, for example, and we can do this by applying certain filters. Once we're happy with our view, all we then need to do is click on Save. Then we click on Publish, and that's then going to publish our view. Going back then, after this is published, we just click on this back button, and that'll then take us back into our solution. So now we've got our columns and we've got our view set up. This is basically all we need now to create our first model-driven app. So if we go into the apps area of our solution, we can then click on New, and then under App, we've got Model-Driven App. We're now going to call this our, incident app, and click on Create. It's best practice that you should give it a description as well, maybe just a little something to say this is going to be used for reporting incidents in the workplace. So the next thing we need to do then is add a page. So we're going to click on Add Page, and we're going to click on the table-based view and form. So we click on Next, and it's going to say, okay, well, what particular table do you want to show? So I'm going to just search incidents, select my incidents table. I'm going to also want to include this in the navigation, which is going to be on the left-hand side. So click on Add, and that's then added me my instance to the left-hand side. You can also see it's also got my view that's set by default. So the full name, date of incident, the body part, and when it was created. So this is now set up my app for me. The final thing you might want to do quickly is actually change the navigation which appears here to just make it a bit more relevant. So rather than just saying group 1. So what we can do is we click on the navigation button on the left hand side, and where we've got group 1 here, which is the sort of the grouping name, what I can do is actually just select that, and on the right hand side of the title, I might just want to call this my sort of navigation. Or we can call it whatever you like, and you can have multiple links under here which go to different sort of tables, or even link out to sort of third-party web pages as well, if say you wanted to link out to more information or something. So now this is ready to go. So if I click on Save, then I click on Publish, and this might just take a minute. That's now published my app and it's ready to play. So all I now need to do is click on this play button. And I can see now my view in place. So the app is almost there and now ready to go. So the very final thing that you will want to do before you start using the app is you'll need to create the forms for your view to load. So then going back into this tab here, I'm going to go click back out of the model driven app and go back into my solution. So I've created my table already, I've created my columns, I've created my views. Now I just need to create the form where when I click on an item within my view, it's going to load up my form. So I'm going to click on the forms area, and I've got a couple of different types of form types here. So we've got things like main form, quick view, and card. I'm only interested in the main one for today because that's the most important. So you click on the main, and this is going to open up what the main form is going to look like. So this is what the form will be when you go into your model driven app, you open up the view, you see an item or you create a new item. This is the form that's going to open up. Now, as you can see, by default, it's just got the default field, which is name and owner, but I want to add a couple of additional fields in here as well. So if I click on the table columns over here, I've then got my full name. So I'm going to click on full name because I want to add that, the date of the incident, as well as the body part. Now, it's also worth noting you can slightly change these kind of layouts. So at the moment, I've currently got a 1-column layout. Now you can change that to be, say, a 2 or 3 column. So I might want to say 2, 3 column like this, and I might choose to break these fields are by dragging and dropping them into these different areas, or what's known as sections. So you might want to change the names of these sections. So it might be these are sort of key details, or and then these are kind of injured employee details or something like that. So you can change the names of these kind of sections as well. So you can have them up to kind of 3 columns, and you can have as many kind of sections underneath these as you want, and you can drag and drop them. Within a section as well, you can also make the section have up to 4 columns. So let's say, for example, this is going to be a 2-column section. I might drag the full name column up and onto the sort of the other side, for example. Once I've got my form complete, all I need to do is click on Save, and then once it's saved, I can click on the Publish button, and that's then going to publish my form. Once it's then published, I'd then go back, and just to get into good practices, I'd go into the All area, and before we give a test run of our app, we're going to select everything and click on Publish, just to make everything sure that everything's published and all up to date. And then we can go into our apps, select our app, and then click on Play, and then this is then going to run the full app. So this is loading the first page where I can see the table, and I'm then going to click on New, which is going to open up my form. Might just need to do a quick refresh of the page, Control F5 for it to fully load. There we go. So our form's loaded up here. Now we can put in some details. Blogs. I've ended up with 2 name fields here by accident, but you get the gist. And then date of incident, so maybe say it's today, a time, so it happened at 11 AM, and a body part injured, which select from a drop down to say it was toes that were injured in this particular one. We can then say save, or we can even save and close, which will then close and then take us back into our view of our table. So now that's essentially from start to finish how we can create a solution. We can create a table inside of Dataverse within our solution. We create the columns within inside of that. We then actually create our model-driven app, and then we've then come back and we've created our form, added the fields to it, and then we've run that through, and this is essentially then what we've got. There's a few additional steps afterwards that you would probably need to sort of know about if you wanted to then share that out with other people. There's some things to consider with security roles, might be setting up business units and teams as well, so if you want to lock down certain data to different people. Of course, you can create multiple different tables and have relationships between them, so this really is just a starting point to get you going and creating your first almost hello world type of model-driven app. If you do have any questions though, please feel free to use the comments box below, and please like and subscribe this video as it really does help our channel.